The young woman's eyes darted around the room, her heart racing. Her name was Rachel, but tonight she was someone else entirely. The walls were painted a stark white, a stark contrast to the chaotic array of art supplies scattered across the floor. Her roommates had left hours ago, leaving her alone in the quiet dorm. She pulled out her phone, checking the time again. The screen glowed eerily in the dark, revealing it was well past midnight. Rachel took a deep breath and tried to convince herself that the shadows weren't moving. Her hand trembled as she picked up the brush. The canvas before her was a canvas of possibility, a silent scream waiting to be released. Rachel had always loved painting, but tonight was different. It was as if the very air was charged with a tension she couldn't explain. She dipped the brush into the black paint and began to make broad strokes, her mind racing with thoughts of the day ahead. "Hey, Rach, you okay?" The sudden voice made Rachel jump, sending a spatter of paint across the floor. She whipped around to see her roommate, Emily, poking her head through the door. Rachel let out a sigh of relief. "You scared the crap out of me," she said, trying to laugh it off. Emily stepped into the room, her eyes squinting to adjust to the darkness. "What's got you so spooked?" Rachel glanced down at the half-finished painting, the shadows seemingly more sinister than before. "It's just this new piece," she lied. "It's giving me the creeps." Emily walked over, peering at the canvas. "It's intense," she said, her voice trailing off. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the painting was watching her, that the shadows had a life of their own. She set the brush down, deciding to tackle it another night. The two of them chatted for a bit, the tension in the room slowly dissipating. Rachel's mind wandered to the party they were planning for the weekend, a much-needed break from their studies. It was going to be epic. All the girls from their floor had been talking about it for days. Rachel had agreed to host it in their suite, despite her usual reservations about noise and mess. But tonight, those worries felt trivial. As they talked, Rachel's phone buzzed on the floor, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number. She picked it up and read it. "I see you." Her blood ran cold. Rachel looked up at Emily, her hand shaking. "What's wrong?" Emily asked, noticing Rachel's pallor. Rachel showed her the message and watched as the color drained from her friend's face. They both knew they had to tell the others, but something held Rachel back. The painting on the easel seemed to leer at her, the shadows within it twisting into a grotesque smile. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine, a sense of foreboding she couldn't shake. She swiped the message away and forced a smile. "It's probably just some dumb prank," she said, trying to sound nonchalant, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was the calm before the storm. And the storm was definitely coming. Emily nodded, trying to look brave, but Rachel could see the fear in her eyes. "Yeah, you're probably right," she said, her voice wavering. They both knew it was a lie, but it was a comforting one. They decided to keep the message to themselves for now, not wanting to ruin the mood of the party preparations. They spent the rest of the night planning and decorating, their laughter echoing down the hallways. But Rachel couldn't help but feel as if they were being watched, as if the shadows themselves were listening in. The week dragged on, each day filled with a mix of excitement and dread. The message had been forgotten, buried beneath piles of glitter and party playlists. The night of the party finally arrived, and the suite was buzzing with activity. Girls from all over the floor filtered in, their voices a cacophony of gossip and laughter. Rachel tried to focus on the task at hand, handing out drinks and making small talk. But every time she glanced at the painting, she felt a twinge of fear. As the party grew louder, Rachel couldn't ignore the whispers that seemed to emanate from the canvas. They grew more insistent, a chorus of voices just at the edge of her hearing. She tried to ignore it, but the painting's pull grew stronger. She excused herself from a group of chattering friends and made her way to her bedroom, the painting's eyes following her the whole way. She shut the door, her heart racing. The whispers grew louder, morphing into words she didn't dare repeat. Rachel felt a hand on her shoulder and spun around, expecting to see one of her roommates, but the room was empty. The painting was alive, the shadows within it stretching out like tendrils, reaching for her. Rachel backed away, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The whispers grew into a cackle, the sound filling her head. She knew she had to get out, had to tell someone. But when she turned to leave, the door was gone. The walls had shifted, leaving her trapped in a nightmare version of her own room. The party outside had vanished, replaced by a deafening silence. Rachel was alone with the painting, and she had the terrible feeling that she had just become the star of its next masterpiece. Her phone was still in her pocket. Rachel fumbled for it, her trembling fingers slipping on the slick surface. She managed to unlock the screen, the light from it casting a feeble glow in the dark room. Her friends' names were still there, but when she tried to call, there was no signal. Panic set in, her thoughts racing as the shadows grew bolder. The hand on her shoulder grew more insistent, and Rachel realized it wasn't just her imagination. It was cold, like ice, and it was pushing her back towards the canvas. With a scream, Rachel flung the door open, or so she thought. It was still painted on the wall, but this time it swung outwards, revealing a corridor she didn't recognize. The hallway was lined with more doors, each with a peephole. Rachel pounded on the first one she saw, the shadows from the painting oozing closer. The door opened to reveal a room identical to hers, but with a different painting. It was a scene of a serene beach, but the waves were crashing in a way that seemed almost violent. Rachel stumbled in, slamming the door shut behind her. The room's occupant, a girl she had never seen before, looked at her with wide eyes. Rachel opened her mouth to explain, but the words wouldn't come. The girl stepped closer, her movements eerie and deliberate. Rachel felt a chill as she noticed the painting's reflection in the girl's pupils. "You shouldn't have come here," the girl whispered, her voice a twisted echo of the whispers from the painting. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. The door behind her began to creak open, and the shadows seeped into the room. Rachel knew she had to run, had to find a way out. She pushed past the girl, the hallway stretching on forever. Each door she tried was locked, each peephole revealing a new, twisted scene. The shadows grew closer, whispering her name, urging her to give in. Rachel felt her sanity slipping away, the walls closing in around her. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and she could feel the cold of the shadow's touch on her skin. Just when she thought she couldn't run anymore, she saw a flicker of light up ahead. A door at the end of the hall was open, and the sound of laughter spilled out. Rachel sprinted towards it, her legs burning with effort. As she reached the threshold, the shadows grabbed at her ankles, tripping her up. She screamed as she fell, her hand reaching out for the light. Her fingers brushed the cool metal of a doorknob, and she pulled herself through, collapsing onto the floor. The light was blinding, and the sound of the party washed over her like a wave. Rachel's heart pounded in her chest as she took in the scene. Her friends were there, dancing and laughing, completely oblivious to her terror. She looked back at the door she had just come from, but it was gone. The wall was a solid expanse of plaster and paint, as if the hallway had never been there. Rachel knew she had to tell someone, had to warn them, but as she tried to stand, she saw her reflection in the mirror, and the shadows in her eyes danced in time with the music. Her friends saw her and rushed over, their faces a mix of concern and excitement. Rachel tried to explain what had happened, but the words came out jumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. They laughed it off, assuming she had had one too many drinks. Rachel felt a hand squeeze her shoulder, and she flinched, expecting the cold grip of the shadows. But it was just one of her roommates, a concerned smile on her face. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to shake off the fear. She told herself she was imagining things, that it was just stress from the party planning, but the whispers didn't stop. They grew louder, drowning out the music. Rachel stumbled through the crowded room, looking for an escape. She spotted a window and pushed her way towards it, the shadows stretching out behind her like a dark river. As she reached the windowsill, the glass shimmered and warped, revealing a night sky filled with twisted, leering faces. Rachel screamed, and this time, the room fell silent. The laughter turned to gasps, and the music ground to a halt. Her friends gathered around her, their eyes full of worry. Rachel looked into the mirror again, and her reflection had changed. The shadows in her eyes had spread, turning her pupils into gaping holes. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and the room grew colder. The partygoers began to back away, their expressions changing from concern to fear. Rachel knew she had to get out, had to find a way to stop this before it was too late. She turned to the window and saw the shadows coalescing into a figure outside, reaching for her with icy fingers. She had to tell the others, had to make them understand. But as she opened her mouth to speak, the only sound that came out was the cackle of the painting. Rachel felt the darkness envelop her, and she knew she was becoming a part of the artwork she had tried so hard to ignore. The room began to spin, the walls warping and changing around her. Rachel stumbled through the partygoers, their faces blurring into a sea of horror and confusion. She made it to the main door, the cold metal of the handle biting into her skin. With a final burst of strength, she threw it open and stumbled into the hallway, the shadows spilling out behind her. The lights flickered and went out, leaving Rachel in complete darkness, but she could still hear the whispers, feel the cold breath of the shadows on her neck. Rachel's thoughts were a jumble of panic and disbelief. Was this real, or was she losing her mind? The emergency exit sign at the end of the hall was her beacon of hope. Rachel stumbled towards it, her hand sliding along the wall to keep her balance. The shadows grew denser, the whispers more urgent, but she didn't dare look back. The door was heavy, but she threw her weight against it, and it swung open with a groan. The stairwell beyond was lit by a single flickering bulb, casting eerie shadows that danced in time with her racing heart. Rachel took the stairs two at a time, the echo of her footsteps the only sound in the otherwise silent building. She had to get out, had to find someone to help her before the shadows consumed her entirely. As she reached the ground floor, Rachel could see the exit sign above the door, the red letters a promise of safety. But as she pushed the door open, the shadows surged forward, wrapping around her legs and pulling her back into the stairwell. Rachel screamed, fighting with all her might to escape their grip. Her friends' faces flashed through her mind, and she thought of the life she had outside this nightmare. Summoning every ounce of strength, Rachel pulled herself free, tumbling out into the cold night air. The door slammed shut behind her, cutting off the whispers, leaving her gasping for breath. Rachel looked around, the quietness of the night, a stark contrast to the chaos inside. She knew she had to get away, had to find help before the painting's influence spread further. But as she stumbled down the deserted street, the shadows followed, always just out of the corner of her eye. Rachel realized with a sinking feeling that the nightmare wasn't over. It had only just begun.